1, 2, 3, שומעים אותנו?
שומעים היטב, נשמע לי. יופי, בסדר, יאללה, גם 12 זה. אז 12 בורזון פוש ו-12.
אז תשלח לי תנועה שאני אעשה את החשבונית.
אהלן, יש לי שאלה. שומעים אותי טוב?
מצוין.
דברו שנייה.
מה קורה, צלל, איך אתה?
איך הדירה, אתה מרוצה?
וואו, חבל הזמן, איזה חדר שינה, לא קלטתי, וואו.
אני מצלם את זה שאתה בחדר שנה ושולח לאופר. זה בטח יכול לסגור שם, אבל את הדלת, צלל.
תבין, אתה הולך ככה, זה כבר נראה מוזר כזה.
ברור, הופה, רגע, שנייה, אנחנו יכולים לתת שואו באמצע,
כן, ריכוזי.
כאלה, נעלם.
רגע, רואים אותנו כבר?
משהו מהעינות האלה, אתם צריכים לעבור שווה.
כן, תשימו. Hey, Derek. Jean-Marie, you can hear me?
Yeah,
Hey, Derek, how are you?
Very good.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you, yeah. There you go. Hello.
Hey. Hi, Jean-Marie.
People starting to come.
You can hear me well?
Yeah, really well.
Well, you're an expert on Zoom, Jean-Marie. For me, it's you know.
I think I've done quite a few already. Hi, Robin.
Here's Robin. Robin? I guess he's on mute. Or hey, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello, how are you, Jean-Marie? Hello, Derek, how are you, Robin, everyone?
I think for some reason.
Robin, you look a bit stuck also. Robin, are you okay?
He's not actually. Yeah.
He's not moving there?
For some reason, he's not moving.
All right.
Oh, now he's moving.
Okay, that's fine.
Is it just camera?
How's everything, Jean-Marie?
Yeah, all is good here, thanks. It's a rainy day today here, but it's good. We're really lucky. At least there's one good news in this mad world today. It's the growing season is easy. The vineyards are beautiful.
Oh wow!
And yeah, everything is going really well. I've never seen such an early growing season. I don't think none of us have ever seen such an early growing season.
Yeah.
It was so early this year, like we've never seen. In last year, we was fighting frost against bud break around it was the 25th of April, and the bud break started around the 18th of April. This year, we had bud break 1st of April.
Wow.
So it's never been so quick. The guys in Côte de Beaune talking about starting harvest probably around mid of August, quite possibly. There'll be some people picking 15th of August, but very different situation compared to 2003. It's not because of a dramatic heat. At the moment, it's chill for us. It's around 22 degrees, 23 degrees. But no, we're lucky. It's all going well.
Yeah, great. Well, it's amazing when everybody stay at home, right? The weather becomes better. It's quite good in Hong Kong too. Not so humid this year.
Well, So somehow during the lockdown period, the weather is fantastic, and when you suddenly are free to go out, the weather is not so good. It's kind of frustrating. The only
Yeah.
the heavy frustrating things for me was we could work in the vineyards, but you couldn't go on a bike ride during weekends. So it was crazy. Hi, Ellie.
Good morning, very early morning.
Ellie? Ellie, you can hear us? I don't think he's...
אלי שושני תעלה לו גם קול.
We can't
Ellie?
hear you.
It's okay.
Robin, you can hear us?
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
That's good.
Yeah,
Hello. Hello, Hong Kong.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I had the computer on mute just I didn't
Yeah,
realize.
you can take off the mask. No, I think...
I'm taking it off right now. Hold on.
So how have you been, Catherine?
Surviving, a little bit boring, stuck in Hong Kong, but still. At least we didn't go through like proper lockdown. We could still go out and eat and drink. So I guess not too bad.
But the airport is open now? You can fly out? Oh, it's still...
You can fly out, but we're not welcomed by many countries, so we can't fly anyway.
The airports were never closed. It's just that whenever you come back to Hong Kong, you need to like self-quarantine for 14 days before you're
If you're a Hong Kong citizen. If you're not
Yeah.
Hong Kong citizen, I don't think
They
you are allowed.
in. Yeah, you're not allowed in.
Oh, it's crazy. Well, it's actually in many countries. It's
And,
like
and
this.
also many countries,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, we're not allowed to go to many countries. They would not receive. Yeah.
Sounds like France is going to reopen.
So where are you now, David?
I'm right now in the center of Tel Aviv, in Israel. So the weather is like similar to Hong Kong, even though now it's 3 in the afternoon here. So.
Right.
But you know, Jean-Marie, I think it's the first time in like 10 years I haven't been to Burgundy that long.
I know it's strange not to have seen it for such a long time. You have Burgundians.
It's really strange, you know. It's
Yeah. You know, I had
for 4 months straight. It's crazy.
I had a dinner with a client the other night, and I was with other growers. And part of the question asked around the table was, what have been the positive things of the lockdown situation? And I think quite a few growers answer say, not doing any tastings. There was Jeremy who was there was
Okay.
and basically, I haven't done any tastings in the cellar for a few months now. So it's been like a break, and we've been able to focus a lot on the growing season. But now we start really missing people. I think that's what, after a while, you realize it's just the human contact is so important.
I think that from a period of time where you have so many visits and tasting, where you have to find some time, you know, because the vineyard just keep growing, is a very strange period, which, I don't know, it's never been like this in Burgundy and in other areas, which no visitors, no tastings.
We all said a huge concern for us here. We just all agreed that we've been lucky that this happened springtime for us. If it would have been during harvest time, we would have had huge trouble for picking the grapes because no can't take anybody. People have to keep the social distance. And harvesting would be an absolute nightmare. It's just like the only solution would be a harvesting machine.
Is John Maria calling?
Yeah, there's more people joining.
Yeah, more and more are joining.
Good morning, everybody.
עכשיו אתה עוד יכול שנייה, זה ככה, אז תחזיר את זה חזרה. Just a second, we are trying to adjust here. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, good. More and more are joining. It's good. Everybody received the wines okay? Why yes?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, very good.
Why yes? Nothing you can hear. Okay. Yeah, more and more. Okay, good.
נזוג לנו גם?
כן, נזוג לנו את הראשון.
Right.
Everybody already join in. You can, in the meantime, until the rest will join us, you can pour the first wine to the glass, which is the Bourgogne Rouge. We will have the time. Okay.
How are you, Jean-Marie? How is the opening of the restaurants? Well in Burgundy? You can go back to the normal dining?
We can go back to the normal dining. We still have to wear the mask when you move in the restaurant, but you can take off the mask when you're set. I think it's a transition period for us. I think it's gonna be easing a bit from 1st of July, but the situation is variable all through France. The Palace of Paris won't reopen until September because basically most of the activities are the tourism and people coming outside from France. And most of the palace for this summer in the south of France won't reopen until next year because they're going to miss the summer season. But no, but for the people who knows, Bruno is reopened in Dijon, so we can still go and enjoy a bit lots of wine bars. And things are coming back.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey,
That's nice.
David.
Hi, everyone.
Great to see so many familiar faces after a few months. Really, we miss all of you. Unfortunately, this is the only way we can do tasting right now.
But it's the best of it. I think
You make
it's
the
very
best of
nice
it.
to see. You can see Jean-Marie from there and from so many continents. I think 3 continents here today with the Ellie, America,
We have, yeah,
Asia, and Europe. And we are in the middle.
yeah, and I think some will join as well. Good. So we can actually start, Marie, and I thought that maybe as more people will join, the idea tonight, maybe you can, just a second, a lot of background noise. So we can start, the idea tonight is about to drink and taste the 17, which we haven't tasted for a long time. So it would be a good idea to see the development after a year, basically, that we tasted them last time in January. So maybe, Jean-Marie, we can start a little bit with discussing about the condition of the 2017 harvest and the year itself.
Look, the quality of the fruit was absolutely just an easy vintage. Just following up 2016, where we had the frost and the buds was damaged by the frost. It was like Mother Nature was trying to compensate the lack of fruits she couldn't give in 2016. So hence why the volumes of 2017 was a little bit bigger. The fact that at the winery we do have a lot of old vineyards, we are never really concerned by big yields. But for the people who have younger vineyards of 30, 40 years old, it was a lot about being cautious on the yield, because it's 2017 is very classic vintage to Burgundy. And what I mean by classic, it's not a vintage made by the hot summer. It's more cooler summer, and where it was very important about the ratio skin to juice in order not to go in a diluted character, but where there was a good balance in the wine. It doesn't have the ripeness of tannins of 18, but it's a pleasurable vintage 17, which basically you don't need to wait 25 years to enjoy. So for me, I like the 70s. I usually attempt to call vintage like 70s in the category of smart buy vintage, because you know they're not going to be speculative, but they're going to give you pleasure in a window of the next 6-7 years, and without becoming speculative vintage. So it's really what is the essence of Burgundy.
Yeah, I agree. They actually, from the get-go, they immediately show this kind of beautiful fruit, really balanced, and it's not like a vintage like 16 or 15 that at the beginning, you know, they were more, let's say, difficult to try when they are young. They are just giving pleasure immediately.
It's a bit like a restaurant vintage, as we can know. You know, here I like to state as a restaurant vintage, but for us also and for everyone as a private client, it's definitely a wonderful vintage that you cannot be, you know, you can really drink very, very high-end wines because they are more open and they are easier to understand. So vintages like that for me are always a great opportunity also to drink much higher wines than we drink regularly so young. So even to go to, let's say, Clos Saint-Jacques 17 will show much more than having 16 or 15. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And also the price that is not such a speculative vintage can give you the opportunity without saying, oh my God, what could it be? Or the length of age you can send these wines.
A part of the idea, historically, I always used to have a vineyard of Bourgogne Rouge, which is at the step of Chambol-Musigny on the territory of Flagey-Chezeaux. I roughly used to produce 9 to 10 barrels. And around, I'd say 15, 17 years ago, one day I had my Japanese importer with walked into the cellar and said, oh, you do Bourgogne Rouge? I want it all. And it was in an era where the Gevrey Village was approachable and people could drink basically Gevrey Village for still a good price 15, 20 years ago. And then it was springtime 2017, I went to New York and I suddenly saw a bottle of Gevrey Village in a restaurant being sold for $280 US. And because of a price rise of how Burgundy has become successful, I was really upset about who's gonna open a bottle of $280 on Tuesday night coming back from the office without feeling guilty for opening such high amount of money. So a part of the idea was to say, well, I don't have by legacy from the domain enough Bourgogne Rouge. So I'm going to start buying a little bit of grapes in vineyards around me, around Gevrey, Chambol, Vougeot, of Bourgogne Rouge to make a bigger, in order to make something which is going to roughly be for final end customers around $50. Because it's important, I think, to keep Burgundy approachable for every generations and any time of the week. So that was basically the entire idea about increasing and suddenly developing a production of Bourgogne Rouge starting from 2017. Because before that, the only 10 barrels I used to make was sold to Japan. So I wanted to open to the public and to people to have their first introduction to Fourrier also. And it's always made with exactly the same spirits and the entire lineup of the rest of the appellation of the domain. I just like to do things right or not doing them. There's no compromise to the quality of, there's no compromise to the quality of the Bourgogne Rouge. It's still, everything is going through the sorting table, everything is strict selections, everything is made in order. It's made with a soul and spirit that I remember when I was 20 and didn't have any money to buy those top bottles of wine, which I was dreaming to taste. And I was chasing up what can I afford in a rice range made by a good name. So it's been basically the entire idea driven by this project, started from 2017, has been made to make a Bourgogne Rouge, which is not any declassification of any of the vineyards of a domain or quality of fruit. It's a Bourgogne Rouge made from proper location of vineyards and vineyards which are close to my own vineyards and made with exactly the same soul and spirits and everything else.
Yeah, because many think that, you know, many domains just don't invest the same investment in Bourgogne Rouge grapes, but this is completely, as someone who is there with you at the harvest, and hopefully this year, the same, exactly the same as Griot Chambertin and Saint-Jacques, as all the Grand Crus Chambertin, is given the same attention to those grapes that are coming in from the Bourgogne Rouge, which, you know, it shows eventually. And this is a great opening for...
Whatever is the range of the wine coming out of the domain, and that's the concept I always had in mind, basically. I'm never guaranteed I'm going to sell it all. And if I don't sell it, I have to drink it. So I always like to do some things that I'm going to be proud to open at home when we are cooking in the evening with Vicky. So to me, from the entry level to the toppest level, it's just there's a bottle you're happy to open on Saturday night, and there's some bottles if you want to enjoy a nice glass of wine on Tuesday night without having the feeling that you break the bank. Or if you want, I like to have the idea that wine is to connect people from every generation. And if you want to introduce your children, you don't necessarily want to crack a bottle of Grand Cru and say this is what a great wine is supposed to taste. Of course, it's going to. I think it's good to introduce and build the palate also of the young generations. And for me, it's walking away from this image that Burgundy is exclusive, high price. I think Burgundy should remain also approachable, but with giving a guarantee to every customers that you won't be disappointed, even if it's a bottle at only $50. You can have a pleasure with a bottle of $50. It's just the level of complexity of wine which is going to be different by the appellation, by the terroir.
I can tell you that here, for sure, this was going on. It is. I mean, many young people here in Israel and Tel Aviv, and many people that like Fourrier very much, are enjoying a lot the Bourgogne Rouge, and it's already reflecting the quality of the domain, and it's one of the most wanted Bourgogne Rouge, as it's so difficult to get nice quantity and nice quality from the great growers of Burgundy with Bourgogne Rouge. And it's something everyone wants today. As you said, the price goes up in many things, and the Bourgogne Rouge, as much as it will go high, it cannot go too much, and people can have it as they are wine aficionados. So the Bourgogne Rouge of you is, just as you said, it's a great example, and this is what's going on.
And you can enjoy it now. Look, we are drinking it now. For me, it's just...
a lot of iron, this kind of fruit of Fourrier, this vibrant energy and everything for me.
I had this conversation with, I won't give name, but with another grower of Burgundy, which one day said to me during a dinner, he said, oh, look, Jean-Marie, I think we are too good to make some Bourgogne Rouge. We are dedicated to make some Grand Cru. And it just was totally, for me, the opposite way of my way of thinking. I think we are losing our customers of Burgundy because it's becoming very exclusive. And who are going to be our customers in the next 10 years? And you always need to start somewhere. For me, that's what is very important. There's alternative to Burgundy. There's great wines made everywhere around the world today.
We have a question also for you, Jean-Marie. So to that Giorgio is asking if not all of the source of the Bourgogne Rouge is from Gevrey. So asking about the source of the grape, what is the quantity from each place, and what is the the
because
source.
as you say, you started with the one near Chambol, but then it expanded.
So the grapes from the domain came from Flagey-Chezeaux, just below Chambol-Musigny. This is around 15%. Then after that, I have a spread basically where I'd say 40% is coming from Gevrey. I have around 20-25% coming from Beauchamp, which is 5 minutes down the road of Gevrey. And the leftover is coming basically from Moret-Saint-Denis. It's really Bourgogne Rouge made local.
Côte de Nuit Bourgogne Rouge.
And it's really Côte de Nuit Bourgogne Rouge, and it's exclusively made from grapes we are buying. It's something which is very important to say. It seems logic for many people, but I'd say today it has become very, very common for people to buy barrels in bulk made by someone else, doing just the élevage and then bottling. For us, the winemaking, and you can testify, David, here.
So what is really important to see and know here is it's the Bourgogne Rouge, but a mix between the domain and very good quality sources of Négoce. So it's really giving the upscale, and it's not kind of a Négoce Bourgogne Rouge that, okay, how much quality it is, it still have the backbone of your work on your own plots.
It is, and one thing which is important to understand, living in Burgundy, I would have never created a Négoce in the 90s. There was too much variations in terms of farming. A lot of people were still using herbicides. I'm tempted to say that the farming process was having much more variations than we've got today. Arriving from the beginning of 2000, but that's been a process which took around a decade. I think people have become more and more cautious about their farming, have become more and more organic. So there is less and less variations in terms of farming. I'd say for the last 10 years, we've seen the European community heavily reducing the choice of chemicals you can buy on the market. And it was actually the only way for people to start to open their mind about alternative farming. Early to 2000, and Claude Leflèvre has opened the door to biodynamic. It's been rethinking about the vineyard after the decade of the 90s, where people was heavily thinking about winemaking process. So it was about the fermenting room, what happened into the fermenting room. And early 2000, it started about rethinking about the vineyards. It's been made with an up and down road, because 2004 and being organic was an absolute, but it takes time and some sacrifice. But I think the last decade, from 2010 to today, the farming in an organic manner has become much more homogeneous between the vineyards, which makes more sense in a certain way. For me,
I think you have
always.
I think you have less. You see less vineyards where you see really someone who's doing organically and someone that really uses, herbicides and so on. You can really see the difference in the soil. So you can really see now that, because Burgundy, you have to understand, many of the vineyards, they share the rows. So it's not just one vineyard for a domain. So it's great to see now that, you walk in the vineyards, you see the soil much healthier than many years before, going through the whole vineyard and not just few rows of talented growers, I would say.
Look, I can drop it now. It's just for the little story because it's old enough and I don't think no one's going to repeat that. But as our vineyards are so close to each other, if your neighbors is heavily contaminated by mildew or oidium, which is a fungus, which if you have the wind blowing, the spores of the disease are not going to stop on the edge of the property. It's going to go to the neighbor. So in 2004, Domaine Leroy was packed of oidium. It was not a huge secret. Everybody knew it. But it was the Chambertin. There was 6 rows in the Chambertin. But the guy who had the vineyards in the south, next row of Domaine Leroy, was just fed up to be contaminated by oidium by Domaine Leroy. So it was keep destroying his own fruits. So eventually, the guy, without calling Madame Leroy or anything, never said anything. When he came with his tractor, he has sprayed the vineyards of Madame Leroy, trying to kill the source of sporulation of a disease. What I'm trying to say is we can have organic philosophy if you have your own block of vineyards, like in Australia, in the US, and you don't have any neighbors. And having one philosophy is very simple. From the moment you have a very small plot of lands, a guy above you, a guy on the right, or a guy on the left, if someone does a bad job, although you've done a good job, it's still going to contaminate you. So hence why it has to be more a mutual understanding from everybody in the farming. And to be fair, we do have tools today to know when are the cycle of sporulation, when is the disease going to be coming, and stuff like that. So we are much more homogeneous today, and that's why for me this Negos project has been very exciting. But I think I started it at the right time. It was, I started a little bit 2011. And with where I am today, it's got its cruising speed today. But I wouldn't have done this project in the past because I would not have had the same quality of fruits. A simple example to see how much actions create reactions. Having worked with Henri Jaillet in 1988, I can tell you which day I was putting Roundup, which is herbicide, in the Richebourg and Croparentou. I still have my school reports just on the shelves there. But it was a method back then, putting herbicides to fight rot. Why? Because if you have no grass on the soil, it don't retain the humidity before harvest, and you don't have the humidity going on the grapes, which would increase the rot. But in the meantime, if you put herbicide on the ground, you're not going to be plowing. And we've all seen these historical facts of farming that when you are plowing, would it be with a horse, with a tractor, you do generate dust. And the dust which you generate behind the wheel of a tractor or behind the horse, this dust goes on the skin of the berries, and the skin of the berries will be covered of natural yeast, all those microorganisms, which is the essential key of terroir. So, and that's why, for example, when in the 80s, the use of herbicide became very popular, suddenly people was not plowing the soil anymore, and they saw decreasing the natural yeast population. on their berries diminishing, and they had problems with their alcoholic fermentation. And that's when modern science started to interfere by offering selected yeast. So you have different types of winemakers today around the world. But some people would not consider making wine without selected yeast, and some people would not consider inoculating their vats. You think that if you trust in your farming, you know that good quality, and that's a part of the definition of terroir. That's a part of respect of the soil. So it's all these components which for me brought me to the idea that I'm happy to drive this project of Negos today exclusively by buying grapes which are close to my vineyards, because I can see the daily farming and practice done in those vineyards, like I can see with my vineyards. And if I'm not happy about the fruits, I wouldn't buy.
Yeah, let's move to the next one.
Yeah, to
the Gevrey Village, which is for many years I would call it the business card of the domain.
The flagship.
Yeah.
If you can put up the map from Gevrey, maybe you can talk a bit, Jean-Marie, about where does it come from, because it's different parcels again. That the Gevrey is not just one parcel. Just we are putting now the map of Gevrey.
Yes, except we've got the Premier Cru and Grand Cru, but we don't have the village.
Yeah, exactly. Let's try to put another map. Okay, we will try. Okay, we will try to put the other map on, but we can discuss about the village and the different parcels. After that, we can see where they are.
And a little bit also about the age of the vines in this cuvée, maybe, and the wood treatment of basically the philosophy of you and everything.
So look, the Gevrey Village is roughly 90%, 95% of a lieu-dit called Champérier, which is the north side of Gevrey-Chambertin. If from the map we can see at the moment on the screen, I'd say it's around 100 meters at the bottom of Combeaumoine. So if you can see where Combeaumoine is, where you see Gevrey-Chambertin, where is TIN of Gevrey-Chambertin, that is basically where it is. And
second.
It's a very nice location. It is a very nice location of Gevrey Village, heart of Gevrey Village, with a vineyard of 90 years old. So the yields are never big, and they do have this natural concentration. Size of the berries from this Gevrey Village, which is usually size of peas or smaller than peas.
Yeah, it's amazing every time, each year when it comes to the vineyard, from the vineyard to the winery, when we saw the grapes, just to look at them, it's just amazing. You see the bunches and they taste so, they are sweet, but beautiful, beautiful grapes that are coming from these very, very old vines.
There is a natural concentration. As they get older, berries being smaller, which means that, technically speaking, older is a vineyard, and the less sensitive you are to the rot. Because if the berries are smaller, you have more air running through the berries. And the ratio skin to juice is absolutely amazing. There's not much juice inside of it. And that's where the winemaking is basically very simple and easy. It's much harder for me to reflect the terroir on a younger vineyard. If you take possession of vineyards of 20 years old, when she's still developing the root system and still give you some big berries, you need to push a bit more the extraction, the maceration, in order to have a bit of a bigger or deeper wine. it's not something I have to do at the winery. So hence why I've always remained with the philosophy very simple and traditionalist. You know, it's just punching the cap by hand. The yeast start fermenting by themselves after 4 to 5 days. But if you have a younger vineyard, or if you have, for example, there's some Java village below the RN74 on the lower parts, where the soil are more sandy, the wines would be lacking. And that's when people would tend to start to play a bit on extraction. So you increase a bit the sulfite in order to extend a long cold maceration. I'm tempted to say it's a little bit like the concept of a tea bag. You will leave macerating longer to have bigger, but you can only do that by increasing the amount of sulfite. The use of dry ice has become more and more popular over the last few years by the young generation of winemakers. And it's as a way to reduce the temperature. But in the meantime, you're going to freeze the berries of the grapes. So I call that the cryo extraction, because by freezing the cells of the berries, you will extract components Mother Nature would have never given to you by punching the cap by hand or by pumping over. So it's always a part of understanding your terroir, your vineyards, making the best with it. But I think sometimes it's a matter of self-confidence and not feeling ashamed to have a wine which is a little bit lighter, because that's the way the terroir is. But sometimes people are frustrated because they think maybe a wine critic will expect my wine to be that big, and the vineyard doesn't have this potential. So I'm going to interfere more to change the wine with the bigger structures than the terroir really is. So it's probably a philosophical debate about in the intervention of a terroir, where does the human intervention start and stop without losing the respect for the terroir.
You have a question, Jean-Marie, about the Gevrey Vievin. Say that this one is wide open for business. And what is your guidance for the older vintages? Which ones you would recommend to drink now?
I'm a big lover of 2011 at the moment. I know it could sound surprising. I know not everybody succeeded in, but I like 11, I like 13. It's probably those vintage, I think, which are delicious to drink at the moment. When the job was done well in those difficult vintage. What I mean by difficult vintage, 7, 11, and 13 have a similarity. We had a very mild springtime. And that's when we had some fungus attack. And if he was there to do the job, he was fine. And unfortunately, what I mean by springtime is the month of May. And for those of you who know the month of May in France, there is at least one bank holiday per week, every single week of May. So which means the people in the area tend to work 3 or 4 days a week, while the vineyards see their biggest growth of the year. So I love 7, 11, and 13. I think, well, 10s obviously are delicious.
10s are amazing, yeah.
And but then it's really great effort for 11, 13, and 7 here. Usually from all your wines from 11 and 13 are really memorable for me. And I love the style, what you made there, and made one of the, maybe, I cannot think about another winemakers in Burgundy made a better 13. So impressive, so fresh, so balanced, well, wonderful 11s, which are great. And also 7 is wonderful, but I think the great success in the 2000s from you, for me, was the 2006. That was really wonderful ones.
Yeah, and they do represent the same challenge very often. Right. It was an entire growing season is a bit like a Grand Prix, you know? you have to be good from the first to the beginning to the end of the. But with the understanding that when we speak about mildew or oidium, those disease, it doesn't mean it tells much to people, but it is an invisible fungus which you only start to see with your eyes after 40 days. But what does is the similar characteristic? Basically, and briefly, mildew is a fungus which likes the cold and humidity, and oidium is a fungus which like the heat. So that's why, for example, there's more oidium in the south of France and rarely mildew. The way we cure it usually is oidium you spray with copper, mildew with sulfur. But whatever actions or inaction, when this sporulation of disease is starting, you will realize 40 days later, a month and a half later, what happened. And this is going to damage the foliage, starting by the foliage, then following up by the grapes. So some people could think it's just going to damage the grapes, but actually the grapes is the solarium panel. The foliage is that solarium panel which is going to make the photosynthesis. And if your leaves are yellow 10 days before the harvest, then you're going to miss these last 5–7% of steps of gap, which is going to give you the phenolic maturity. On a vintage like 06, 11, 10, 13 does have this similarity. If you manage to reach a healthy foliage until harvest, you'll reach a good phenolic maturity. If you don't do this job, and it starts from the month of May, if you don't do it properly, then your leaves turns yellow, and your leaves run out of energy to finish the proper ripening of the grapes. And by the time you're going to pick the grapes, they will be sweet but won't have any flavor. The pips will still be green, and you will still lack of the last few components to make the terroir speaking.
Jean-Marie, there's another question about, do you do the same kind of ratios between, if I understand correctly, between the different plots of Gevrey Village? It's the same combination together each year, or sometimes you declassify part of it, or it's always the same, just mix all the vineyards together of the Gevrey Village?
It's usually the same.
Good answer.
Yeah.
But going back also to the, you asked me earlier about what is the oak.
Just a second, I think we lost you.
It's historically and have always been for me 20% at every single range of appellations, which is the regular turnover of barrels. I don't want to have one vintage more impacted by oak than a. Why 20%? 20% oak flavor into the wine. I come from a background where I go back in time, but basically in an era where in 1985, Robert Parker used to tour Burgundy and was advising every growers of Burgundy to use 100% new oak. There was several growers who refused to jump in the temptation of the 100% new oak. And Fevlet, for example, has been a very obvious one who went to court against Mr. Parker for writing stuff. But my father was one of those characters, basically, who have refused the 100% new oak. And my father always had this phrase. He always used to say, "We make wine with grapes, not with barrels." So hence why I was not a fashionable winery in the 90s, when everybody else in Gevrey-Chambertin was using 100% new oak. I remember back then having one day a sommelier who came to taste in the cellar, and his first comment in the cellar was, "This is the first wine I ever tasted in my life which wasn't in new oak." But for me, it was always preserving the terroir and having the proudness as a farmer first, to the integrity of what with the less interference from the oak as possible. But it's always been the same politic I've always kept. And you know, I think I'm opinionated enough to say that I wasn't fashionable in the 90s. Maybe the name of Fourri has become popular today, and nothing guarantees me that in 10 years' time I'm going to be popular again. But I will still stick to the same philosophy, like the growers was in the past. What made Henri Jaillet great, the guy's been following his path all his life with a certain philosophy, but haven't changed his style of winemaking every decade. And I think that's what is respectable. But it's not about changing and readapting your winemaking style by what is the fashion of the moment. Anyway, by the time a bottle is pleasurable to drink, the fashion has already changed, and the wine will be out of fashion. So for me, it's really remain. I am lucky to be born in Burgundy and have this understanding of terroirs, which has been transmitted, that I want to preserve into the bottles on every level of appellations.
Okay, we have another question. Would you consider the Gevrey Village as the benchmark to determine characteristic and success of the vintage, or would it be another wine in the portfolio?
That's a good question. No, I think it's usually, the Village is a very good benchmark. What is interesting to understand, it's probably some of the vineyards today which are the most exposed to the issue of global warming. Why? Because when you look at the map of Burgundy, I think a lot of people know it's RN74 heading north-south. Sunrise goes on the flat hill, on the flat side on the east, and sunset on the west. So all the Premier Cru and Grand Cru of Gevrey being on the slope, they are the first vineyards still remaining in the shadow when the sun goes down in the afternoon. And that's one of the characteristics of 18 and 19. There was roughly, I'd say, 45 minutes to around an hour less exposure to the sun in summer for the Grand Cru and Premier Cru than the Village. So where we tend to see today some of the ripeness character or over ripeness character, I'm tempted to say, of some vintage, it becomes the Village. So I agree that the benchmark would probably be the Village, because that's what is standing between the RN74 and the step of the hill we start to climb. But I think also Gevrey Village is a benchmark of quality of the domain overall in general for Burgundy. Because if a village is good, you know that the rest higher is going to be even better.
Good. We can go now to the third wine, because this is Gevrey Village. I can drink a bottle myself, actually. It's just drinking amazing, Jean-Marie. It's really showing beautifully.
The drinkability is amazing. I mean, one of my favorite thing, even, you know, in our portfolio, but actually in your wines is the complexity with such a beautiful drinkability on all the time. So me as a guy that I really like to drink and enjoy the bottle, and when I finish it, I don't like to be smashed down. So it has a lot of energy always, you know, it's great. You come whenever you drink, midday and whatever your, how do you feel makes no difference, because when I get always to your wines, you have so much energy, so much freshness. In the worst days, it always gives a pleasure.
Sorry, it's Vougeot?
Maybe
about the
Gevrey. Show the map of Vougeot.
Yeah, so now we drink the Petit Vougeot 17, yeah?
Yeah, which is a very special vineyard with Jean-Marie. Maybe you can, Loze, which you can explain about it. Just a second.
Yeah. It's
Until our technical difficulties will be solved, we can talk about the wine for now.
no, that's fine. Vougeot is the only appellation of France, of entire France, that there is more Grand Cru than Premier Cru or Village. It's the only French exception. So it's even much harder to find Vougeot Village than to find Vougeot Premier Cru, than it is to find Clos Vougeot. And I always, we're probably going to see it on the map. For me, it's one of the hidden gems that this wine should have never been classified in Vougeot. This wine should have been classified as Chambol-Musigny Premier Cru, Les Petits Vougeot. We are surrounded basically on the left by Clos Vougeot. Just above, we have Musigny, and it's basically the topsoil of Musigny, which by erosion, so we can see it's the topsoil of the cliff, which is above of the topsoil of Musigny came to feed this vineyard, which is in a curve. So basically, we could say that Les Petits Vougeot is probably made of what used to be the topsoil of Musigny 500 years ago. By erosion, everything comes into Les Petits Vougeot. And you can see on the right that it's surrounded by Les Amoureuses. So a lot of people, when they see the label, think it's a little bit light compared to Clos Vougeot, which is usually a bit more rustic with a bit more structure. But actually, this wine is a 95% character great Chambol. It's a hidden great Chambol for a good value compared to its location. It has to be seen as a good value Chambol. I've always loved this wine, but to me, my only frustration in life was why has it not been called Chambol-Musigny, Premier Cru, Les Petits Vougeot?
It's really one of the, for me personal, I know the wine from you, but I had it last time. I had it also from Charles in the barrel, and I always say, to Odlo Noela, wow, I mean, the Vougeot Premier Cru, it's absolutely stunning. And for me, it's like one of the terroirs, the less known terroirs, which you can really find in unbelievable price for its quality. It's better than 80% the Clos Vougeot there are. It's bordering Amoureuse, Musigny, and the Musigny plot in Clos Vougeot.
Look, if you compare the vineyard where it's located and to the bottom part of Clos Vougeot, you can definitely see that Petit Vougeot is...
Or middle even.
Let's say
amazing.
I'm modest here, but it's the location is just beautiful. People are, if it will be called this, not Petit Vougeot, but Petit Amoureuse, I'm sure it will be...
As people might think it's a small Clos Vougeot, but it's not a small Clos Vougeot. It's actually it's small plot of a very, very beautiful location of Clos Vougeot.
But I think it's always to keep that little list on your phone when you go in a restaurant, wherever you travel around the world, that you know that when you have to pick some wine on the wine list, there is those hidden gems, a bit like the Saint-Aubin Premier Cru, Les Murges et les Dents de Chien, the worst commercial name could ever think of, but it's just, I think, just above Montrachet, and it's a fraction of the price of a Montrachet. And when you choose right from a wine list in a restaurant, you know that you can't beat the value for it. And I think there's a couple of appellations like it for Burgundy, and Vougeot Premier Cru, Les Petits Vougeot is one of them.
There's another question about CO2.
Yes.
In the wines, and I think it's better for you to explain exactly how is the élevage domain and the use of CO2.
Okay, sure. It's my philosophy started basically. I took over the domain in '95, and I was doing the wines from the books and where everybody was doing it and all of that. And 97 to me it was obvious that it was a vintage, but with a very fine spine. And I thought if I would rack them after malolactic, I would do more damage than good to the wine. And it's been the first vintage I decided to live on its sediment, no racking, nothing at all, with my father pressurizing me and telling me there will be taste of the lees and it's going to go wrong. And no one else has ever done that on reds in Burgundy. In the whites, people was aging on lees, speaking about batonnage and starting to say, are you going to do batonnage on your red? No, I'm not going to. I'm going to touch nothing. And I was starting to read because I'm tempted to say that the education I received from the wine school was scientific, but I realized that I finished my degree of school and university with more fears than confidence. And I started to read other books, and I started to read Jules Chauvet, which is considered as one of the fathers of wine with no sulfite. Basically, he was saying that the quantity of sulfite you're going to be using from day one, the grapes are coming, until the bottling. So, you know, you're going to use when the grapes are coming. After in barrels, you had 3-4 times sulfur. Then at the bottling, you want to be covered because of the free sulfite, because the bottles are going to be traveling. So you need to add 25 parts per million of free sulfites. Anyway, all of this makes a total amount of sulfite. But the total quantity of sulfite, which is combined with the molecules of the wine, when you're going to be drinking the wine, the pH of your stomach is lower than the pH of the wine. So the combined molecule of sulfite, which has been used through the entire process, when it's going to reach your stomach in a lower pH, in a lower acidity, everything is going to re-become free sulfite. So basically, it's just going to be like if I was just giving you a bottle of SO2 to drink just like that, that's the same effect to your body. So I personally have always been sensitive to headache with sulfite. And as I always say, I always made wine the way I like it is for me before I share it. And the preservation of CO2 by interfering less through the élevage of the wines, basically to say that I talk a lot to say that I do nothing, if I resume it. I leave everything in barrels and preserving 80% older barrels. I have less breathing exchange, so I preserve more of the CO2, except that the CO2 might bother a little bit people when they open the bottle, but if you decant the wine, the CO2 evaporates. While the sulfite is a chemical added, you will never be able to remove from the wine. So with my wines, I try to find a balance without an extreme philosophy. It's all about balance. I don't claim making wine with 0 sulfite, but I don't want to claim that it's purely on CO2. I'm trying to adjust a balance where, to me, a part of the key of the potential of aging of bottles, the CO2 is a part of this. Because when you taste all vintage of Burgundy, there was made far much before any belief, trust, or use of high quantity of sulfite, and their wines have aged beautifully with a much thinner structure. They didn't have the phenolic maturity we had, but they had good acidity, and when there was from the bees in the vineyards, there was not racking or being as interventionist as we was. Becoming interventionist came with modern oenology, starting from the 70s. Before that, people was not much touching their wines, and their barrels was even older than what we are using today. Their barrels was 20, 25 with that thick of mold around their barrels. So I'm trying to combine. For me, what is important is through the direction of wines I like to do on the part of respect of terroir is the purity of the wine, respecting the terroir and the drinkability of the wine. And that's this harmony and balance. And that's why for me, CO2 is a key, which with time, I reinforce in my belief, because one of the things that not necessarily people knows, CO2 is a natural acid. So with those vintage we are facing in Burgundy now, like 18, 19, with more ripeness. So we don't need to speak about acidification. The CO2 is going to be one of those natural components, just because I preserve and don't interfere in the wine, that is going to lift up the freshness, character, and sensation of the wine.
Great. Another question that we have here is that about destemming and whole cluster Vendange. So historically, all the wines are destemmed at the domain, but the question is that did you change your philosophy towards whole bunch or still 100% destemming?
For a very long time, that's the first thing I did in 1995. I was searching my identity, and I kept 30% of stems in the entire vintage 95. And I didn't really like it because I thought that the structure of the tannins of the stems was dominating a bit the structure of the wine. And I've been hermetic to the use of stems for a very, and I'd say for the last 2 or 3 years, with the change of climate, with now the change of phenolic maturity we are reaching, and I think that's one of the challenge we are facing. What I mean is our grandparents, basically, or even fathers, I'm talking about the 70s and before the 70s, for example, we used to reach the sugar level before the phenolic maturity, and we were still picking on the acidity. Today we tend to reach. No, sorry, we was reaching the other way around, because our issue today is we reach sugar level before phenolic maturity, and there was reaching phenolic maturity in the past before high sugar level enough, hence why they used to chaptalize. So today a lot of people tend to pick earlier and earlier, and not necessarily on the 100 days program. So it's a part of my thought of the last 3 years, basically 3-4 years. I've been to reconsider the stems, and David was there when we've done those tests. Basically, I've been experimenting destemming old bunches, but also destemming, collecting some and putting back the stems into the tank after destemming and putting around 20%. Why? And I had this conversation with some growers who are using old bunches in Berlin. To me, if I put whole bunches, there is a phase during the cold maceration of 3 or 4 days, which smells acetate, and acetate is the nail varnish remover. And you think, ooh, there's something a bit dodgy, not a nice smell. And it usually, with old bunches, basically, you tend to see the VA, volatile acidity, going up much higher than if you destem. But a part of the reflection and why I've reconsidered the stems, some of the great wines I've been tasting in the last 3 or 4 years was made with some stems, and I'm thinking about 09 and the 15 I've really enjoyed. And I thought that those winemakers have used this for their property of absorption. In a vintage which have too much phenolic maturity, if there's too much color, too much tannins, the stems can be used today as a sponge to absorb a bit of extra of what is too much of the vintage. So hence why, and first time 2019 for the entire branch of the domain, I have destemmed everything, and I've put back 20% of stems after destemming into the vintage, because I thought the phenolic of 19 was too opulent, too big. So I wanted to use the stems for the ability to absorb the extra ripeness of the vintage 19. I would not necessarily have had this use of fault 20 or 25 years ago when we didn't have this issue of overripeness.
Great. As we pour the fourth wine, before we discuss about that, there was an earlier question, if you can explain a little bit about the difference in Clos Saint-Jacques between the regular Clos Saint-Jacques and the Cuvée Centenaire.
Yeah, the Cuvée Centenaire, we have a part of the Clos Saint-Jacques has been planted in 1900, 1901. And we've got only a few vines removing in that plot of land. Not 100% of them are that age anymore. Some of them have been replaced over time. So we send a first lot of pickers to exclusively pick from those berries, because being over 100 years old, the size of the berries are so small that they're around. I sarcastically call that the caviar of the Clos Saint-Jacques, because the amount of skin compared to the amount of juice in it gives the most impressive natural concentration into this wine. I don't want to do more than 2 barrels of this, because I don't want to unbalance the regular Clos Saint-Jacques. That's why it's so limited. It's in order to preserve the regular Clos Saint-Jacques, which we make around 16 barrels. Depends on vintage, roughly 14 to 16, and depending on vintage, and it's 1 to 2 barrels of Centenaire.
And we can maybe try to get up the map of Monomanen to see. Maybe you can explain a bit about.
Maybe also about the Negos.
First of all, about the Negos project, which
Beside
many of
the
you
Bocaux.
already know, but in general about the Negos project, about the different vineyards that we have, and then we can talk specifically about the Echezot.
Sorry, can you repeat, David?
If we can start to talk a bit, you can explain a bit about the Negos project that we started, yes. And then we can go specifically about Echezot and where it is located and so on.
Yeah, and maybe why you chose those vineyards to make the wines from them and not another ones, and how do you see the few years past with the negotiant business of you, and that you're taking the same plots mainly, and then, you know, a little bit to understand that.
Yeah, basically I started in 2011, the project of Negos, when it was becoming more and more obvious that it would be impossible to buy vineyards in Burgundy without putting a loan on the head of my children. And in the meantime, we've seen that transition where there was also some potential investors would buy some vineyards and give them to some growers. But I've been more or less like a free spirit, and I've always liked to remain free in what I'm doing. And I started with a very strict and firm ideas that the Negos would produce appellations that the domain is not already producing. So I've been offered grapes of Combeaumoine or of Griot, but I never wanted to buy, because I've always wanted to keep the two things separated. It was also a part of my request that it would be exclusively made from vineyards which are close to my vineyards, that I can monitor the management all year long. And it's been for me a journey of discovery, which I had no regrets to have started 10 years ago. And the relationship basically with PoB Burgundy was also when the fruit started to become more and more popular, and there was more and more people in Burgundy starting to create some negos. It was becoming harder and harder to secure some fruits and find some contracts. So with the support and agreement in terms of relationship with PoB Burgundy, It's been the beginning from 2013 of acquiring some appellations like Les Amoureuses and Chambertin. That was a bit of my range of what I could afford, because when I started in 2011, I borrowed money at the bank, and the first thing the bank asked me was to sign my house as a guarantee. And of course, you don't sleep so well at night. And if there's one thing that I do like in this world is my sleep. So it's been a great road and venture to do that with Pearl of Burgundy, because they gave me the possibility to expand the range and me to keep my sleep at night. So since we have started from 2013 acquiring La Trissière, Chambertin, Amoureuse, we have kept exactly the same suppliers, the same contract, the same people. And I always said, because Burgundy is the only place in the world that people would make such a difference between buying fruits from your neighbor than from your own land. If you're in California, or if you're in Australia or elsewhere, you don't care so much if the fruit was bought from the neighbor or from your own piece of land. But down the road, I always say that for me, the winemaking process is a 3-step. The growing season is the pregnancy, the harvest, you are giving birth, and the élevage is the kids grow up at home. So I always say that the project of Négoce, for me, I am unable, financially speaking, to buy any lands today. It's more than 50 years payback to buy any piece of land in Burgundy today. So I have not been able to do the pregnancy of those wines, but at least going to pick the grapes in the vineyard, having seen how they've been farmed all year long. But from collecting the grapes, picking them from the vineyard, and then making from that stage the winemaking, it's all done exactly in the same manner as the rest of the domain. The only difference is just I don't own the land. But it's a very free, I feel free in my head to be creative, use stems, no stems. I have no pressure from investors. I can really make the wine in the same soul and spirits and the same lineup of the domain. I think I reached basically the size I wanted to reach for Burgundy. I have no need to get any bigger. It's been like a dream for me also to touch appellations, because if you love what you do, it's difficult when it's not in part of your family legacy to work a row of vineyards, for example, in Cherbourg, and looking at the vineyard of Chambertin, and when you work in Cherbourg and looking at this vineyard and think, I just wonder how the wine would be if I would have a few rows there. So it's been opening me the chance to touch that dream. Now I know how I could make the Chambertin. But I didn't felt, for example, into the stereotype. I don't make wine for score points. So that's why it's been nice through this journey. The Chambertin doesn't have more oak than the Bourgogne Rouge. There's no more new oak. Because for me, what makes a great Chambertin is the soil of Chambertin. It's not the amount of oak I'm going to put into it. Actually, putting more oak into it would hide the soil. But
how do you keep your connection with the suppliers in the time of harvest? You choose it by yourself. Your team is going. I mean, you know all the process during the year and the harvest, of course.
Exactly. I chose it, and I have to admit that I see a general panic happening in Burgundy with the change of climate. And when next time you will all be coming to Burgundy, you'll notice there's more and more people now starting to do like Madame Leroy, who have increased the height of the vineyards to a level which is huge, which is not really my personal belief. I don't think it's the leaves of the 56th floor, which is going to make the photosynthesis on the grapes on the 5th floor. I think it attends to somehow demands more energy to the plant. But I do believe in increasing the width of the foliage. But it's important really to find this right balance on how can I protect my leaves from sunburn, how can I postpone, I'm tempted to say, reaching a high percentage of alcohol, which can go up before the phenolic maturity. And today, I see people in Côte de Beaune, some people are harvesting around 87 days from flowering. It's earlier and earlier, and it gives a certain style of wine. But for reds, I see people now being at 90 days from flowering. And as a matter of fact, yes, when you taste the berries, the grapes are sweet. But actually, when you start to take the berries out of your mouth, you realize that the pulp is still sticking to the pip. The pip is still half green, and it just tastes sweet, but it doesn't have flavor. So it's about a puzzle you have to fit in your head about your farming management, about what should I do in order to rematch a 13 and a half with a real phenolic maturity. But today people are panicking. They just look at the acidity. They just look at the percentage of alcohol, but the wines haven't got the phenolic maturity. And what I mean by phenolic maturity, the skin of the berries is made of lots of little cells, like bags. And if they're unripe, it's the flavor, and the flavor, it's the terroir. So after that, you lose a part of the definition of terroir, and you have a wine which will reflect more a signature of winemaking than a terroir. So it's about really thinking as a puzzle, like I've been exploring the use of amphoras, because a part of my reflection was, will oak be the future of aging Burgundy? Because if we get more and more structure into the wines, we don't need more structure from the wood. So how are we going to preserve the freshness and the purity, which is the definition of a terroir? So it's all those reflections, and bearing in mind that when you only make wine once per year, the train only stops at your door once per year. Even if you've done 50 vintage in your life, you've only made wine only 50 times. So you have to be a fast learner with an equation surrounding you which keeps changing.
Yeah, we have one question. I will try to ask it. So we have and question in any views on high density planting. I know it's very common now on the white ones with all the Lamy project, but then
I'm not sure it's legal now to do the.
I don't know, but what is your what do you see and think about high density planting on reds in Burgundy, which is, you know, we know in Burgundy is more than the other world, 10,000 by hectare, a bit more, but what is your view on it?
Well, the entire idea of high density was to generate a competition between the roots, because if they can't find nutriments close to where they are, it forces them to go down. And that's historically why Burgundy already used to be high density. In the past, it used to be 12 to 13,000 vines per hectare or more, because you just needed the space for a horse to walk through, or even before that, there was not even a horse plowing. It was not cultivated. People used to cut in winter, put their canes on the soil, which was degrading with time. I had this conversation, I think, with Aubert, saying that he said in 45, walking on in the vineyards of Romani County, it was like walking on a soft mousse, basically. It was made of wood degrading from the pruning of previous years. The high density concept is generally with the idea that the deeper your roots will go, the more you will reflect the terroir. I think with the climate of today, it's something which also is potentially interesting to gain in terms of complexity. As long as we keep the climate we've got today, we can increase the foliage, we can increase a certain volumes. But if you hit a vintage, which is very rainy, very mild, you compact the foliage, and then the vineyards with too high density will be more sensitive to the rot. There's never any perfect or ideal scenario, you know, where you make two columns. There is the positive and the negative, and you have to make
a choice.
It, huh? But down the road, and I think that's what is really nice for everybody, we sort of feel that we are learners all our life. We are keep experimenting. No one is right or wrong, really. It's about experimenting, testing, and the nicest things I think today is we have more exchange between growers than our parents ever had. So we can even taste, go to a place of each other's and have an exchange of ideas, which is a very cool thing. But what Hubert is, what we are doing at the moment is if you want to reproduce it, if at Domain Fourri I want to do it, I would start today and only my children would see the benefit of it. You see, it's such a slow process.
Yeah, let's go to talk about Echezeaux a little bit. We can see the map and we can talk maybe Jean-Marie about where it comes from. And then there was a question, what is your favorite plot of Echezeaux?
And also mainly about Echezeaux, as here we see the real 12 Echezeaux ones with the Boumamba on the map. But then we have very big difference between each Liodine Echezeaux, about 4 different qualities we have. And so you can speak about...
Yeah, we can start first where the Echezeaux that we are drinking comes from, and then we can talk about maybe other plots of Echezeaux and Liodine, because it's like Clos Vougeot, it's a really big Grand Cru.
Yeah, so basically it's coming from the Champs Traversins with a small hint which touch the corner of Orvaux and Poulaillère. That's at the crossroad of those 3 places. It's always been the same supplier. I got the grapes from since 2011. It's very nice because it's just coming out of La Combe d'Orvaux. So it's in the shadow, and it's always the coolest part, just behind the Musigny, and from that combe, the coolest part of Echezeaux. So, for example, les Poulaillères and what's the low part? For example, Grand Echezeaux, then les Champs Traversins, because on the left side of the map, it's sunset. So it's we can quickly remove where is the Champs Traversins around 45 minutes to an hour of sun every single day, which makes a huge difference in terms of freshness of the wine. So for me, I love this location because some Echezeaux, the Vaune Romanée rustic character, and yeah, as you go towards the north, you get more the definition really of a bit more, I'd say, a hint of Musigny coming up into the wine. So I like this balance of this location. To be fair, it was by luck I found the contract at the beginning from this location. But sorry?
Do you think because of the global warming, this part of Echezeaux, which is a bit more cooler than many other parts, is giving also some natural freshness today these days?
Yeah, I'd say 20, 30 years ago, Orvaux didn't have a good reputation because it was the location too early in the shadow, which wasn't ripening very well. And we realize now with vintage like 18, 19, those appellations when you enter in the combs are cooler of 1 or 2 degrees, and those 1 or 2 degrees in summer make a huge gap in terms of difference at the end for the quality of the wine.
Because I think generally Echezeaux, which basically in the past was, because we have a lot of coolness in Echezeaux, because we have also the combe of the Combe d'Orvaux, and we have also the combe coming from
we have the you have the forest just...
Both and the forest. So the global warming is not only a Chazot became more famous now because of, it was a bit less expensive Grand Cru, but then also today the global warming gave a Chazot a new phase, new phase, which is the ripeness is easier, it's more beautiful, and it's still keeping a lot of freshness. So,
and also today, I think you have great domains that bring the name of a Chazot that have a reputation today that it didn't have
and it's right.
years ago. And it's right. So it's great. Yeah. Another question, Jean-Marie, is basically when you are making the Chazot, okay, you have the experience from when you started with Henri Jayer. Do you have the Chazot in mind when you are thinking of making a Chazot, or is there any?
Yeah, I think that's why I've loved, and it was one of the first appellations I went for. There was a bit of nostalgia. Henri was more in a Chazot du Dessus, but the ripeness was very different. It was 88. But it was definitely with a part of nostalgia. I was enjoying to touch this vineyard, although it's not rare, a Chazot. But with definitely the approach and the wish to see what it was going to be like to do intracellular maceration, a bit like Henri was doing, although the élevage is quite different from Henri. Henri in 88 was using 100% yoke. He used to find the wine. The process was made very differently. But it's still an idea to make my own Chazot. I've often said that as a part of my philosophy. I don't want to make Henri's wine. I don't want to make my father's wine. I just want to make my own wine with my own signature. So it's been nice for me and I enjoy basically working, because a Chazot to me as a rustic, I'm tempted to say sometimes it's got this fine balance between rustic and mineral character, but when you reach the right harmony, it's a wine which really sings for me. But as I agree that with the change of climate, the locations of a Chazot have changed. The best location of a Chazot have changed with the change of climate.
And so if we already speak about your kind of some dreams, so if I can ask, what would be your dream vineyard, domain dream vineyard, one vineyard that you could make?
In addition to the ones...
Yeah, if everything is open and you need to choose one, no matter the price, you can just pick it up.
The answer is fairly easy because I think it's really, being a guy from Côte de Nuit, I think Musigny, having known all this area, is definitely the vineyard I'd like to touch with my finger. But not because it's Musigny, not because it's great. It's always by the passion. It's always passion. Musigny, I've always been curious. For example, I would have loved the idea to have Ruchotte, because I have a lot of vineyards on one side of Gevrey, and I like to see what's the opposite side of Comte de Labo can give me. It's like a mirror. And I like to describe myself as an explorer. I love to explore things. I'm curious, and life is too short, and I want to enjoy discovering and touching and understanding those terroirs. And to be fair, I would have no pretension to say that you can make from the first vintage the best wine. It's like a children. It takes for to, and I think it's more or less the same thing for the wine lovers. To follow it, it has taken some time to understand what I was trying to do with my négoce. Was it just going to be the guy who was going to use his name to make more wines? It wasn't that for me. It's always been animated only and purely by touching terroir. I cannot buy land anymore.
Well, I would love you to make some Musigny and Ruchotte. And I like, what I like most in Burgundy? When you ask the winemakers, I didn't hear until now winemaker tell me Romane Conti, Latash, you know, it's like on the side. We speak about Muzini, it's possible. We have some winemakers, you know.
It would
nice.
be like saying, do you want to be God? I'm not that pretentious.
Of course.
Jean-Marie, you're still very young, and I think Muzini could be there in the future, I'm sure. We have another question. Now we are going outside of Burgundy, outside of France, actually.
For the client, you have some news about Muzini that we don't know?
No, outside of France.
Okay.
There's no Muzini outside of France. If you can talk a bit about the new project that was announced about Bas Philippe in Australia.
I have known. I've met my wife through my Australian importer in 2001, and when I visited Australia in 2002. I spoke with my father-in-law, and for a conversation, I'd say, oh, look, I'd be curious to discover Australian wineries, and said, you want to do a bit of consulting? And it came up that I did some consulting for Philip Jones back then. So we spent 2 days, and I did like an audit of his place, vineyards. We've been having conversation about high density of vineyards, and hence why so many years later, Philip has built a reputation of high density and all of that. And Philip is definitely one of the most thoughtful person I've ever met when it comes to make wine. He's thinking every young girl is I don't think his brain give him a rest at night when he's sleeping. So, and I lost a bit contact. I was still tasting some Bas Philippe when I was coming in Hong Kong, when I was traveling, because he didn't really export much of his wines. But I always remain a long time admirer of Bas Philippe. And around a year and a half ago, I was approached by some partners who say, hey, Bas Philippe is for sale. We're looking for someone who would like to join the venture. And I've been touring a bit the world for the last 3 years to see where could I expand a bit my activities, for a very simple reason to explain. I have a sister here in Gevrey-Chambertin. There will be one day that there would be a split of the 22 acres or the 10 hectares of a domain. And I do have 2 children, and my 2 children are French and British, basically. So the boy is 15, and it's about thinking always, I'm enjoying these journeys at his life, but if I can make him constructive and eventually being a source of inspiration for the children. So I've been visiting Oregon, I went South Africa, I went different places. But when the opportunity a year and a half ago of having Bas Philippe coming on my desk and having seen what Philippe has done for the last 40 years of work, having a chance to invest, being one of the owner, I'm not a consultant there. I've invested into the project. I have with my 2 other partners, we are very equal. It's really a nice relationship. And suddenly having the possibility to take in hands vineyards of 40 years old, which has been naturally driven by somebody who has proven in a non-wine region what could be achieved in terms of purity, drinkability. I'm tempted to say that I jumped in it because it's Bas Philippe. I don't want to make Burgundy wine in Australia. It's absolute nonsense for me. But I absolutely love the purity, the complexity. And what fascinates me the most at the day of today about Bas Philippe, it's the vineyards have no irrigation. The vineyards are planted in dairy land. It's surrounded by cows eating grass. And it's basically not affected by global warming when it comes to the climate. It's still 1,000 millimeters of rain per year. The biggest issue is mildew. It's roughly the climate of Burgundy of late 70s, early 80s we had in Burgundy. Yeah, so, you know, for me, there's a lot of question at the moment about how the climate is changing with Burgundy and should we buy some vineyards in UK. But for me, it's so fascinating to have found, it's just like having had a chance to take over such an historical legacy. I feel privileged that Philip accepted to sell to us, and the possibility to make purity, complexity, and elegance. But also, there might be a masochist situation for me, but you know, I'll probably be lucky enough to pretend that I've done more than 50 vintage in my life. I'll probably have done 70 or 80 if I'm lucky enough. So it's doubling my experience. I just love this journey, but it's again passion which animates me for this project.
And I think it's amazing for Burgundy winemaker to make the harvest. You can go to make the harvest.
That's the thing.
Because it's on the other time
two harvests.
year.
Exactly. When I was going to say, when the weather is grim in March, foggy and terrible in Burgundy, I will enjoy doing harvest.
So
March.
now every year is a 2, Jean-Marie. Now every year is a 2. Your next is 100.
But you know, time is running, and I realize that a year is nothing. Times run fast. I see the kids growing up, and I just want to increase my experience. Enjoy. We live in a small world. I realize how the world is smaller and smaller every single day. There's passion for Pinot Noir everywhere. And for me, it's just my first for my curiosity, my passion needs to be fed. I cannot stand still. If I stand still, I feel like I'm backwarding. So I love exploring this, and Bas Philippe to me is one of those jewels of Australia, which was a nod to business.
Great. Now, if we can go back to Burgundy, there's a question that what is your view on 2019 vintage?
Well, the 2019 vintage is one of the vintage which the challenge was finding the right moment about.
No. Yeah.
As much as in 18, we've seen a plateau of whiteness, and after that, the temperature stay cool. You could have been harvesting for 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a half. The analytic parameters of a vintage didn't really matter. There was not changing. The acidity remained the same. The sugar level remained the same. The window for harvesting in 2019 was 4 days. Before that, the peaks were still green. It was sweet, but lacking of flavor. There was just a moment, a short period that you could reach the right balance where you still was 13.5% of alcohol with a good phenolic maturity. And then after that, you was switching to 14% of alcohol. So it was a very narrow window with very, very small berries. That's why the yield are tiny in 19. The size of berries was remarkably small, but without such high acidities than was 2010. So the wines could have turned a bit heavy. So hence why I decided in 19 to preserve 20% of stems, or re-adding 20% of stems, was to absorb the excess of phenolic maturity of the vintage, but with a good freshness. But the volumes are on average compared to 18 around 30%, and there was 30% smaller just because the berries was 30% smaller than in 18. So you can imagine the concentration there is in the wines, and why it could have been easy to have wines a bit too huge or too big. It's not a vintage for me which is dedicated to too much new oak, for example. I'd be a bit cautious with a 100% new oak, and I'd be a bit concerned about it.
So if there are any other questions,
this
I
is
think
the
it's
time.
the best time.
Yeah. If you have anyone else who wants to ask anything else from Jean-Marie, now is a good time to do it.
And if,
As we
and if
finish
not,
here,
we can say thank you very much to Jean-Marie and having this wonderful 3 continents tasting.
It's the first time we're doing this kind of tasting, which is very new to me. I'm used to sitting down together with all of you around the table, at least with some nice food and so on. So this is definitely a new 2020 kind of thing, which is now more and more popular. So thank you everyone for joining this first Zoom tasting that we did, and we hope to do.
See you soon again.
See you soon again on Zoom, unfortunately, until we can do that again in Hong Kong. But it's been a great time. Jean-Marie, thank you very much. It's been always, as always, a great, great pleasure. Thank you. Cheers to everyone. Great to see you.
Thanks, and I look forward to see you all in person next time, Burgundy or Hong Kong or every corner of the world. And have a good evening and good morning. I know there's people, it's morning, evening around the world. Thanks so much we miss you in Burgundy. We look forward to see you all.
Yeah, we hope to come soon.
So thank you, Jean-Marie and Apple House for this wonderful tasting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To all of you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.